Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and today I'm going to be pulling back the curtain just a little bit to talk about my work in reviewing indie books in depth. This is mostly because that it has been a year to the day, if you're watching this on the day it was uploaded, since I uploaded my very first indie book review. On January 27th of 2019, I uploaded my review for Starmark Rising by Shami Stovall, and I consider that to be a huge moment for my channel. I had not intended to do a lot of indie book reviews when I first started my channel in October of 2018, and getting that email from Shami, I believe, was it late December or early January, was a huge moment. I was so flattered. I can low-key actually still remember where I was when I responded to that email on my phone. I was so excited about it. But it began something for me that picked up, especially the second half of 2019. Currently, in that year span, I have reviewed 50 indie books, and it's kind of become my favorite part of my channel, and so I wanted to talk a little bit in depth about it. This might be a little bit longer of a video because I don't want to leave anything out, so I apologize for the length if that becomes an issue, but I really just wanted to talk about my process and how much fun this has all been and how I plan on continuing moving forward. So the first step is, how do I get the indie books? And I think for the most part, this is probably the part that most people get like caught up in when they want to start reading or reviewing indie books, is how do I get started? And it's kind of one of the trickier parts because until it's become known that you read and review indie, it can be a little hard to get your name out there. I was lucky that I already had a couple videos on my channel. The best and worst of indie books videos had already gone up, and Shami found me from that. But in general, I get mostly emails from authors. Occasionally Twitter DMs, but I prefer emails, which is why in almost every video I post, you'll see my email in the description along with my review policy. And I have asked for a couple, meaning if I'm on Twitter, or I think one came from like a Discord, and I see an author talking about their book and maybe they're rebranding or they just need reviewers for another reason, and I like the synopsis, and usually at this point I'll also try to find like a first chapter excerpt or something to read through, I'll offer them the opportunity. And this took me a little bit to figure out because I do have the rule that I only review books I got for free, because I've already reviewed 50 books that I was sent for free, so it feels disingenuous to give another author both money and multiple reviews, because you get reviews on multiple platforms when I review the book. It feels disingenuous to give them both a review and money for it. So I usually have figured out that you phrase it something in the way of, if you would be interested in exchanging a copy for a review, let me know. Rather than saying, hey, if you're going to give me a free version, I'll review it for you, which it took me a lot to figure out that particular wording, and it seems to be working out. At the very least, no one's ever been like, you selfish bitch, in reply. Most of the time, people will either be interested and send me the book, or I think sometimes I just get left unread. But regardless, that only happens occasionally. I also am technically a part of a couple one of those review sites that are for indie books, where you can basically just like sign up and they'll be like, oh, 30 open review spots left for this book. I very rarely pick anything off of those because my review list is usually fairly long. My to-review list, as I keep it updated on Goodreads, one of the few things Goodreads is good for, it has not been below double digits since August of 2019. This is kind of the way it goes. You know, every time I put up another indie review and I can take one off my list, I will usually end up getting another email just asking for one. So it's very rare that I can keep it below double digits. And so I can't really fill up on any extra ones beyond that. So I'd rather focus on the specific authors that have asked me personally to review. And there is always the question of, what will I review? And in this case, I am looking at a more broader sense of the list I want to cultivate. Because a big part of my channel is I want to be able to suggest a very wide variety of books to people. I have things like my booktuber recommendation series, you know, my calling out X booktuber videos. I also will like scour Twitter for any one of those, looking for book recommendations and recommend indie books. but it doesn't help if I have only mostly one genre or one age range to recommend. I want to have a wider array. So as a result, if I have any one genre majority in my list, I will usually kind of avoid accepting more of that genre. So a heads up, high fantasies are usually kind of difficult to convince me to read because they're very prevalent. In high fantasies, I am much more critical of the writing, the synopsis, the cover. It helps if it's diverse, if the main character is someone that is from a non-white, non-neurodiverse background. Even queer, to a certain extent, is becoming prevalent enough where it's not an own voices group that I need to like be specifically on the lookout for. But if you have a high fantasy that's like the main character is black as the author is, because own voices always matters to me. And if you are writing from a demographic that you are not personally from, it is not an automatic no, but I will be asking questions, and I will be asking things like, what research did you do? What sensitivity readers did you like utilize? Like, who did you send this to make sure that you didn't put something harmful in it? Because I am not from most marginalized communities, so I can't say for certain whether or not something is harmful. So I need to know that you did the work on your end so that I don't have to worry about accidentally promoting something that ends up being harmful. I also take into account things like length. I am much more likely to accept a book under 200 pages than one over 500. I usually will automatically accept most children's books because most of those are ones I can read in a day. So it's like, okay, one day in a book read, that works out well for me. But in general, I try to make it as wide an array as possible. So it is fully possible that you could send me a book and I might be interested in it, but I have like 4 other books in that genre or with that same kind of vibe or feel or within that same age range that means that I need to focus on another portion, with the main exception there being anything in space. Although that's not really an issue with it getting too full on my list because there's so few books in space, but I love them so much. So after I accepted the book, I try so hard to get them read in a decent time. I want to get it read like within 2 months, and that so rarely happens. My current read I received in like mid-November, and it is late January, and I get to the point where I was like, okay, no, I just literally have to read this book. I'm so far behind. I just have to read this now. So most of the time, though, I will try to read based on my mood and based on the readathons I'm doing. I do not partake in a booktube readathon unless I can fit at least one indie review book in one of the prompts, because otherwise it's just pointless. I can't really take a week to a month reading other books with no review books entirely and risk burning myself out when, again, I never have under 2 digits in my review list. Now, if it has gotten to that longer point, I do apologize. I'm trying to get better at that. Thankfully, I was really smart with the books I chose, so every other book I have on my review list was December or later, thankfully. But I will try to catch up, even if it's a panic, oh god, I gotta get reading book. I read either physical or digital. If it is digital, I will usually ask for it in a PDF because my Kindle's a jerk. And I found out it's not just mine. Kindle batteries are notorious for not holding a charge or not charging well. So the number of times I will try to get this thing charged and it just won't work is numerous. And I've tried multiple charging cords and I am about ready to just freaking give up on it and just accept that all Kindle books will have to be read on my phone. But because of that, and I don't want to read indie books on my phone, or my indie review books at least, I will ask for them in PDF form and then I'll end up reading them on this old iPad that I have. And I know what you're saying, Margaret, you could just download the Kindle app on your iPad. And I could, if it wasn't old. Because the iPad I have doesn't allow for any new apps to be downloaded beyond whatever software update, because an iPad 2 doesn't have any more software updates for it. But I don't really want to go buy a new one because I didn't even buy this one. I got this one for free from my technophile father-in-law. So I will usually ask for a PDF and I'll read it in iBooks, and I actually like having a really big like reading space, or I will get them in physical copy. And as you can see up here are all my indie books, physical copies of. I actually, and I'm so proud of this, I have too many to fit on this shelf. I currently have some sitting off to the side here, and I literally need to, like, I don't know if I start taking over this shelf, I don't know. But I'm including more indie books now. I will, one day I would love to have like just an entire bookcase. That's just physical copies of indie books, all signed. That is like the dream, but that's later. So regardless, either one, I will take notes at regular intervals, and I'm going to try to cover this up so I don't accidentally spoil Unknown Horizons for anyone. But I will do things like ending at page, and I will usually do it in increments somewhere between 25 to like 35 to begin with, and then as I continue reading the book, I'll do it in larger and larger increments, usually because the beginning of the book has the most setup and the most info dumping in some cases, and I don't like to repeat myself in my notes. And strangely enough, I don't actually reference these when I actually do the review. This is basically just one of those instances where the act of writing it helps me remember more than just reading. And in other cases, I will actually be thinking about what I want to say as I read, like the day of. So like if I'm at work and I've got some mental space to let myself wander a little bit, I will be thinking about what I want to say at a certain point. Like obviously I can't be like the ending was if I haven't finished the book yet, but I'll be thinking in my head, even as I'm still in the days of reading the book, what I want to say. Therefore, when I'm done, I don't have to like sit down and think it all out. I'll have most of it already in my brain, and I can just add on what I thought about the ending. The review itself will not be filmed, for the most part, the same day as I finish the book. Now, if I'm in a rush to get the review out in a decent amount of time before a book is published, I might do it to save time, but for the most part, I want it to be at least the next day after. That way I can kind of let my thoughts settle, figure out exactly what I want to say, exactly what I thought about the book, because sometimes I've noticed for me, there'll be instances where I'm so happy to have finished a book and have another book I can check off my list that I'll often have like way nicer things to say about it than if I think about it. Or in some cases, I'll get so annoyed at this one part, and then after thinking about it, I'll realize, okay, it actually makes more sense in the context of the story. So like giving myself even just like a night of sleep to step back and be like, okay, what do I honestly think about this book is enough to put it all into perspective for me. And my notes that I actually take, and the things I actually think aren't very technical a lot of the time. It's not things like, oh yes, I see a plot hole on this page. It's very much more emotive and emotional, and I want to remember exactly what I thought about certain things. And my notes might be a little spoilery if you read them, but in all actuality, a lot of them are like weird, vague things that it'll be like, you know, say there's a character named Johnny, and I'll be like, Johnny, no! And you don't know what happened to Johnny, but it's fun for me to reread them, actually. And I've thought about like taking pictures to send to the authors of my notes, but like I'm also kind of nervous about what they would say about that, because I will say disparaging things at the time if I'm really annoyed with the book. So maybe not send notes. But the actual filming of the review will take place a day or two after, not too long after. I still want to kind of get that sweet spot where I have a solid feeling about my opinions, but also I don't want to go so far in the future that I begin to forget things that genuinely made me emotional, because I like when I can bring those emotions into the video and have like a genuine beaming smile on my face, or you know, sometimes not. I try not to make too disparaging of facial expressions. I don't even think I'm capable of it, because the one video where I tried to be like very stern, I ended up looking like an angry Muppet. So I try to keep my facial expressions from neutral to positive, because any other way and it looks weird. And the filming itself done on my phone, because this is not a monetized channel and I do not have the money to invest hundreds of dollars into it, at least not yet. I will actually film multiple times, and that's with most of my videos, this one included. I think this take that I am currently on as you're watching this is like my fourth take because I do it all in one sitting. I have a very train of thought way of speaking, and I don't like over editing. When I do go to edit, I will usually only edit out either very obvious things that I said incorrectly, like if I mispronounced a character's name and then like 30 seconds later I said, oh no, wait, it's this name, I'll cut that out. You know, those little embarrassing things, or like long pauses as I'm trying to look for something, or long pauses as, you know, if I drop the book and I have to pick it up. But I try to keep very limited editing, so I keep very limited mistakes, if possible, in my filming. So if I gone off on this tangent and I realize that like the last 2 minutes of what I've said has next to nothing useful, I'll just start over. In a lot of cases, that 3 or 4 times of starting over, by the time I go to speak of it again, I'm even much more aware of what I want to say and how to say it succinctly. I've noticed that the more I say things about a book, the more I know what I want to say. And that's why in a lot of cases, the books that I talk about the most and the synopses I talk about the most tend to sound all the same, but that's because I decided this gathering of words summarizes my feelings about this the best. So I'm just going to remember that summary and reuse it, because I don't need to spend all that brain power coming up with new and inventive ways to talk about the same book. So usually most of the time, the videos I aim to keep between 8 and 15 minutes, more or less. Now, if they're a short story, which I actually am getting a lot of short stories on my list, it'll be like as little as 5 or 6 minutes, because I just don't have enough material to talk about. And if they are over 500 pages, or it's just a book that I just truly adored, it could be up to like 16 to 18 minutes. But I am diehard most of the time that book videos should never be above 20 minutes, although this one might be. But my book reviews, especially because book reviews tend to be a very specific kind of video that a very specific kind of person wants, I want to make sure that it's short enough that it's appealing to people who maybe don't want that in-depth of a review. And in most cases, if you've already read the book in review, you don't need to know all that much about it, so I don't need to go that much into the synopses. I try not to go too much in the synopsis if possible, mostly because I consider it kind of a moot point if you can go and look it up and read it through. I'll usually focus more on my opinions of it and give you only what you need to know to learn or to frame my own opinions of it. I try not to spoil. I try really hard not to spoil. And it's really hard when some of my biggest opinions and biggest emotions are on plot points that are very spoilery. And it's hard, but as much as I don't spoil, I also think that talking about like this big thing happens and it was, can often work to hype up a book, because I can be like, I can't tell you the specifics, but this thing, it makes it be like, ooh, what is this thing? I must learn about this thing. It can help. And I hope I've never gone too spoilery, because I never want to like ruin the book for someone else. And the one exception to all of this is, and I've mentioned this in my review policy, is of course with trigger warnings. If at any point I see that there is instances of something that could be triggering and it's not put in the book at some point, like, even like just down in the corner of like the first page or something, I will say it in the review, and I feel no bones about the fact of spoiling something that could cause an episode in someone else's mental health. I know there's a whole discussion about it, and trigger warnings are ruining books or whatever nonsense, but I don't want someone else's month to be ruined mental health wise because they decided to follow my recommendation for a book. Like, the idea of that breaks my heart. And that will be in every form of the review. I will review in a video, such as this. I will also do Amazon and Goodreads reviews, and my Amazon and Goodreads reviews are like 5 to 7 paragraphs long. So I'll cover generally most of the points that I liked or didn't like in a book, and I will include some form of trigger warnings or content warnings if necessary, but I don't repeat the synopses in those, because my whole thing is, if you're looking at the page where the reviews are, the synopsis is usually somewhere also on that page, so like, why would I like repeat something else that's already on that page. And I hate when people do that, when they'll do like an entire beat for beat retelling of the synopsis in their review. Like, it's literally, scroll up, it's right there. Why am I repeating that? It's right up there. And those reviews often tend to be like 10 to 15 paragraphs long, and that's just too long for a book review, especially when yours is one of many reviews on a site. So in general, I will review video, Amazon, and Goodreads. I will also do some other different ones if you would like. Most of the time my Amazon reviews get through. There was one time where I referred to the villain of the piece as a psychopath, and that word got flagged by the Amazon system, and they refused to let the review go through. So I've technically only reviewed 49 indie books on Amazon, at least that I got for review, because things like, in December will often get reviews as well. My in December reviews, because I did not get those books specifically for review, will often be shorter. They'll be something like 1 to 2 paragraphs at most, because I want to save the more in-depth 527 for the books that I was sent personally. I will also try to use the most neutral language that I can when talking about things that I did not like. Again, I'm very much aware the majority of the time that the person whose book I'm reviewing is going to read or watch the review that I'm making, and it makes me paranoid at times. I mentioned before in videos that if I believe that the author is not going to be receptive to a book review that is less than completely positive, if they're the kind of person that sees 3 stars as negative, or they'll take it as a personal insult if it's 2 stars, I will not review that book, because I know that the author is going to see it. Oftentimes they will reply to me, and I don't need that level of, not attack, but like negative feedback in my life. I will try to make my reviews as even-keeled as possible. You will note that I have yet to review a book at less than 2 stars, because I am such an avid DNFer. I will just DNF the book if it's looking like a 1 star, because in my mind, that doesn't help anyone. For me to waste brain power and risk a slump for a book that is then not even gonna help the author with the review, no one wins in that situation. I've wasted time and risked a reading slump, and they've gotten a poor review, and no one wins. In some cases, and this is still mental to me because this isn't something that most reviewers have to worry about, is there are some books where I have greater social clout than the person whose book I'm reviewing. Because if it's a debut novel from an indie author that's got like 400 followers on Twitter, and I'm sitting here as a, like, not respected, I don't know that I could say that about myself yet, but a known and I guess established indie book reviewer with 2,000 Twitter followers, and I post that review, I have to be very mindful of the fact that I'm not punching down on someone that has like less social media presence than me. And I'm not trying to say that like, oh, I'm this big powerful reviewer and I can decide the fate of indie authors, but in cases where I am maybe have been around the book community for longer or have a more established platform than the indie author whose book I'm reviewing, because in some cases indie authors won't start their platform until they're about ready to publish, I want to be careful that I'm not framing them in a negative light, because I have yet, take that back, I've only had one case where one author is on my will not review moving forward list, and I talked about that in another video, so I won't go into it here, but I had an indie author respond horribly to one of my reviews, and so I was basically like, well, this is unprofessional, you're on my list. And I'll put the video in the description below if you really want to see the worst indie author response I ever got to one of my reviews. But I want to cultivate more relationships with indie authors moving forward. I want to cultivate a network for myself, essentially, because some of my biggest bookish friends online have been indie authors whose works I reviewed. I reviewed Laura Diaz de Arce's short story collection months and months ago, and she and I can now go like 3 hours talking on the phone. And I don't want to ruin that with an unnecessarily negative review if I can help it. So that's usually why I'll give the DNF message that I hate sending, but it's necessary. And most of the time, it's a very gracious response. And the majority of my interactions with the indie community have been fantastic. I, with only one exception, have had universally fantastic interactions with indie authors, and I want to continue that. So I am making a point of seeking out new indie authors. Obviously, I always love getting sequels, and there are some sequels that I am like chomping at the bit to get. I want the next book in the Shane Ashby trilogy by Summer Kiska. I want, like I mentioned a million times, I want Star Mark Vendetta by Shami Stovall, and I love those, but I also want to keep spreading out and finding new authors to review. I want to start doing author interviews if I can figure out how to make it work, because YouTube has become more and more unfriendly to streaming options, so I'm working on that. But I would love to do that kind of thing. In general, I would love to become known as a predominant voice in reviewing indie books. I would like to become a reason that more people pick up indie books. I would love to become a bridge between people who refuse to put self-published books on their review list and indie books, because I fully believe that BookTube and indie authors should have a greater connection. BookTube should not constantly be scrambling to get the established platforms in the bookish community to recognize us. We should be forming bonds with people at the same level as us and building our own community moving forward. And I did not intend for this video to turn into this discussion, but here we are, nearly half an hour long. I have enjoyed this last year so much. I didn't expect my channel to turn into what it's turned into, and I know there are still people that believe that reviews aren't profitable on the platform. I've heard people that don't really emphasize when they're reading indie books, so they might read indie books and you'll never know that that book is indie. And I would love to see a greater connection between the two. I have loved being indie author adjacent. It's very hard to figure out where I am, because I've definitely made a lot of friends, and I feel like I'm part of the community, but also I'm not an indie author, at least not yet. So it's like I don't really know where my place is, but it's been so much fun, and I'm looking forward to another year moving forward. Maybe I'll learn a little bit more. Maybe I'll add another page to my review policy. Maybe I'll finally find a giant list of own voices books to review and all the demographics that I'm looking for. So I've got a lot of plans moving forward, and I hope y'all are prepared for this, because there's just gonna be way more even in this next year. I want to review like 4 a month minimum. So yes. So thank you so much for sticking around and watching all of this. If you would like a review as an indie author, you can check out my links down in the description along with my review policy. Again, yes, 5 pages, but it does have a lot of good information. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.